All right, gearing up for your AQA Conflict and Tension exam, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to blitz through everything you need to know about the causes, the stalemate, and the end of the First World War. Let's just dive right in.
So here's the big question, right? How on earth did this actually happen? It really wasn't just one single thing, but this crazy chain reaction of rivalry, ambition, and honestly, a lot of fear. By the end of this, you'll be able to nail that question.
Okay, first things first, the long-term causes. You really have to think of Europe back then as a giant powder keg, just stuffed with explosive ingredients, waiting for a spark. Let's break down what those ingredients actually were.
So, by the early 1900s, Europe was basically a continent split in two. You had two major teams. On one side, the Triple Alliance, that's Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. And to counter that, Britain, France, and Russia formed their own club, the Triple Entente. Now, this whole alliance system is absolutely critical because it meant that one little local argument could instantly drag the entire continent into a massive war.
And at the very heart of all this tension was the rivalry between Britain and Germany. See, Germany's leader, Kaiser Wilhelm II, he was super ambitious. He launched this thing called Weltpolitik, which just means world policy, and its whole point was to challenge Britain's spot as the #1 power in the world. Now for your exam, this is the key link you have to make. Weltpolitik led directly to a naval arms race. Germany started building these massive new battleships, so Britain, whose whole power depended on its navy, had no choice but to build even more. This competition just created this massive cloud of suspicion and hostility.
So we've got all these long-term tensions just simmering away. Now we need the spark. And that spark was lit in a place called the Balkans. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was this huge, sprawling state with tons of different ethnic groups, was absolutely terrified of rising Slav nationalism. They were especially worried about their small but very ambitious neighbor Serbia, who, by the way, was backed by the enormous Russian Empire. This was the flashpoint.
And here is how the dominoes fell, one after another. First, a Serb nationalist assassinates Archduke Franz Ferdinand. In response, Austria-Hungary, with Germany's full support, declares war on Serbia. Then Russia, Serbia's ally, starts mobilizing its huge army. That triggers Germany to declare war on Russia, and then on Russia's ally, France. Now to get to France quickly, Germany invades neutral Belgium, and that was the final straw. Citing a very old treaty to protect Belgium, Britain declared war on Germany. And just like that, the powder keg had exploded.
You know, everyone thought this war would be over by Christmas. They could not have been more wrong. Let's move on and see how this war of movement got bogged down into a brutal stalemate.
For the exam, this term is absolutely vital. A stalemate is a deadlock. It's when nobody can win. After the first few battles in 1914, the armies on the Western Front literally dug themselves into the ground, creating this incredible network of trenches that stretched all the way from the Swiss border to the North Sea. And for nearly 4 years, that line barely moved an inch.
So why did the stalemate even happen? Well, it all goes back to Germany's master plan for a quick war, the Schlieffen Plan. The whole idea was to avoid a two-front war. They'd smash through Belgium, knock France out of the war in a few weeks, and then turn around to deal with the slow-moving Russian army. But it failed. Belgium put up a surprisingly tough fight, slowing the Germans right down. The Russians, they mobilized way faster than anyone expected. And the German advance was stopped dead in its tracks at the Battle of the Marne, just outside Paris. With neither side able to get around the other, they had no choice but to dig in. And this led to the horrific reality of trench warfare, the mud, the rats, the constant threat of shell fire. With no way to break through the enemy lines, the generals turned to a new, incredibly grim strategy, the war of attrition. The goal was simple and it was brutal. Just kill more of the enemy than they kill of you. Grind them down until they had absolutely no men or resources left to fight with.
These 3 battles, they are the ultimate examples of attrition. At the Somme, the British Army suffered nearly 60,000 casualties on the first day. At Verdun, the French and Germans inflicted almost 1 million casualties on each other. And Passchendaele was fought in a literal sea of mud for almost no gain at all. They were just industrial-scale slaughter, and none of them broke the stalemate.
And you've got to remember, the war wasn't only fought in the trenches of France. It's really crucial to know about the other fronts. The Gallipoli campaign was a failed attempt to knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war. At sea, the Battle of Jutland was the only huge naval battle. And, this is critical, Germany's U-boat campaign tried to starve Britain into submission by sinking its supply ships, a move that would have massive consequences.
So how was this deadlock finally broken? After years of this grinding attrition, a series of game-changing events brought the war to a really dramatic close. Let's take a look at how it all went down.
1917 was the pivotal year. First, something that was a massive win for Germany. The Bolshevik Revolution happened, and it pulled Russia right out of the war. This freed up hundreds of thousands of German soldiers for the Western Front. But then Germany made a fatal mistake. They restarted unrestricted submarine warfare, sinking American ships, and that was the final push the USA needed to join the war. So here's the key takeaway. Russia's exit gave Germany a short window of opportunity, but America's entry gave the Allies overwhelming long-term strength.
So knowing the Americans were coming, the German General Ludendorff launched one final, massive attack in the spring of 1918. It was a last roll of the dice. And using new tactics, it almost worked. They pushed the Allies back for miles. But the German army was just exhausted. They couldn't keep the attack going. And then, the Allies, now reinforced with fresh American troops and new tech like tanks, launched their own huge counterattack, the 100 Days Offensive, which just systematically broke the German lines.
And then the end came so quickly. The Allied naval blockade was literally starving the German people. The army was in full retreat. At home, morale just collapsed, leading to strikes and mutinies. Faced with a full-blown revolution, Kaiser Wilhelm abdicated and fled the country. The new German government had no choice but to sign the armistice, a ceasefire, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918.
This quote from the British Foreign Secretary right on the eve of the war is just so powerful. It really captures the feeling that an entire world was coming to an end. Empires had crumbled, millions were dead, and the map of Europe was about to be completely redrawn.
So the fighting was over, but the conflict? That was not. The peace treaties that came next, especially the Treaty of Versailles, would create this bitter legacy of resentment. They didn't just end one war. In many ways, they laid the groundwork for a second, even more devastating global conflict just 20 years later.